Hey everyone, welcome to HFY Galactic Empire Fall. Real human stories, nothing more artificial. Because HFY begins with humanity. I'm Naira Solis. Subscribe. The signal starts now. The calibration strip on the edge of the wall display curled by less than a millimeter and stayed there. Mara Ilian noticed it because she had been looking at the screen without reading it. The strip was supposed to lie flat against the housing. It had done so for 3 years. Now one corner had lifted, making a thin pale line where adhesive no longer held. She put 2 fingers on it, pressed it down, and felt the warmth of the display through the plastic. When she removed her hand, the edge remained flat for a second, then eased up again. She left it. On the desk in front of her sat a stack of printed briefs no one strictly needed. The room could project any document onto air, onto glass, onto the inside of a lens. Mara still asked for paper when the subject mattered. She liked the resistance of it. She liked knowing which pages had been handled and which had not. She aligned the stack once against the desk pad, then adjusted it again until the corners matched. Across from her, Commander Elias Venn stood by the long window and watched the limb of Earth cross beneath the station. He did not lean. He rarely leaned on anything. One hand rested behind his back. The other held a slate turned dark. The office had been designed for receptions, not waiting. Too much glass. Too much reflected light. Even so, it had become a waiting room this week. Signals from the Galactic Council had arrived with the regularity of bills, each one more formal than the last. Time-stamped, translated, authenticated, repeated through channels meant to demonstrate patience rather than urgency. Mara had answered the first 3. The 4th remained open on the side monitor. Its text sat in narrow columns, severe and exacting. Compliance window, 72 standard hours. Failure to respond will be recorded as refusal. Refusal will be treated as withdrawal from mediated status. She read the middle line again, though there was nothing in it to discover. Behind her, the wall vent gave a dry, restrained hum. Every 11 seconds, a relay inside the office lighting clicked so softly that visitors never noticed it. Mara had once counted the interval during a trade deadlock with the Hadron clusters. She counted it again now without meaning to. 9, 10, click. Did they send the attachment twice? She said. Or did legal duplicate it? Elias turned from the window but did not come closer yet. Twice. On purpose. Yes. She nodded as if this confirmed something useful. The duplicated attachment sat beneath the ultimatum. A draft enforcement protocol, formatted as though implementation had already begun. Asset reviews, traffic restrictions, arbitration suspension, monitoring authority transferred from neutral committees to council security adjuncts. The language was cautious. That was the part she disliked. Hostile language made its own mistakes. Careful language usually had backing. Elias crossed the room and set his dark slate beside the paper stack. He had the habit of placing objects exactly where they belonged in his mind, even in rooms that were not his. The slate landed parallel to the desk edge, not the stack. A separate geometry, separate purpose. He looked at the lifted calibration strip. Maintenance. Adhesive. He touched the edge, felt it rise again, then withdrew his hand. You could replace the whole display. It still works. That wasn't the point. No, Mara said. There was a pause long enough to hold agreement without saying it. The office door remained open to the outer chamber, where 2 aides worked in near silence. One was sorting incoming transcripts by source confidence. The other was marking time lag discrepancies between council relays and civilian relay mirrors. On a station like this, even anxiety arrived as administrative labor. Mara turned a page. Have we confirmed fleet motion? 3 formations repositioned. 1 near the Vesta lanes. 2 farther out. Farther out meaning? Far enough to deny they're related. She made a small mark in the margin with an actual pen. Ink, not stylus. And our own. Quiet. Quiet is not a position. It is today. She looked up at him then. He was not being difficult. He was being exact, which in him was often mistaken for resistance. Elias Venn disliked language that suggested more motion than existed. On his reports, ships never surged or loomed or signaled intent. They changed vector. They held. They entered range. It made his documents harder to read and easier to trust. Mara folded the marked page beneath the rest. I have a call with Geneva in 17 minutes. They won't tell you anything. They'll tell me what they want recorded. That's not the same thing. It often is. Elias slid the dark slate closer and woke its display. A sparse grid appeared. Station traffic. Relay pathing. A thin scatter of council transponders. Several civilian clusters. One freight spine dipping under the ring. No military overlays. Those were held elsewhere. Do you remember? Mara said, still looking at the paper. The first time they used the term mediated status for us? Yes. They said it as if it were a courtesy. Elias glanced toward the window. Earth had rotated enough that sunlight caught the ocean in one hard streak. It was a courtesy, he said. At the time. Was it? Yes. Because they meant it? Because we needed it. That settled in the room with the faint vent hum. Mara leaned back. Not far. The chair had a slight leftward drift in its base if she put full weight on one arm. She knew it and compensated without thinking. A year ago she had requested repair. Then she had withdrawn the request. There was something useful in learning how a room moved under you. The call indicator glowed on the desk. 3 minutes early. Geneva liked to appear efficient by being ready before anyone else. She ignored it until the second pulse. Elias stepped away from the desk and moved back to the window. Not out of courtesy. Out of habit. He did not like being visible in diplomatic recordings unless his presence served a reason that could be footnoted later. Mara accepted the connection. The air above the desk thickened into a soft projection. Council Liaison Seared Veil appeared in measured detail from the chest upward, enough to show posture and the severe overlap of his ceremonial collar. He had the narrow stillness of someone who believed composure could become leverage if held long enough. Minister Ilian, he said. Liaison. His eyes shifted once, taking in the office. Not the planet. The desk. The papers. The fact that she had chosen her station office over a formal chamber. We appreciate your availability. Mara placed her pen horizontally over the top page. You sent an ultimatum. A procedural deadline. Then we appreciate your vocabulary. Vale did not respond to that. He had learned over years that she used mild phrasing the way some people used knives. You have reviewed the council's position. I have reviewed the packet. And, Mara let a second pass. And I find it strangely final for a document addressed to a member polity whose consent, in earlier statutes, was treated as foundational. Vale's expression did not change. The statutes were written for a narrower network. So laws grow downward now. Interesting. We are dealing with instability. No, Mara said. You are dealing with uncertainty. Those are different things, and your packet keeps pretending otherwise. At the window, Elias remained still. In the glass, his reflection stood beside Earth's curve. Vale clasped his hands outside the bottom of frame. Minister, the council is not seeking confrontation. Then why send enforcement language before the negotiation phase closes? Because experience suggests delay. Delay suggests someone still has a choice. The council hopes Earth will exercise that choice responsibly. Mara looked at the lifted calibration strip instead of at him. It had begun to rise again. Such a small failure. Barely visible unless you knew where to look. The packet assumes an outcome, she said. It anticipates one. That's a lawyer's answer. It is the correct one. She glanced down at the duplicate attachment. Why send the enforcement protocol twice? A fraction of a pause. Enough. Redundancy, Vale said. Of course. The line held clean. Too clean, which meant somewhere 3 layers down, people were listening live and stripping delay artifacts before transmission. Mara rested both hands on the desk. Here is what I can formally say at this time. Earth has received the Council's packet. Earth does not accept preconditioned enforcement language as a basis for further dialogue. Earth does not acknowledge your right to redefine mediated status without bilateral review. Vale's face stayed composed, but his gaze sharpened. Is that your government's final position? No. That is what I am willing to say before your deadline expires. That distinction may not be useful. It may not be useful to you. There it was again, the slight pressure behind his stillness. Not anger. Something more administrative. A schedule slipping. The council has shown restraint, he said. Mara almost smiled, but not enough to become visible. Restraint is a word institutions use when they want credit for not acting yet. A light clicked in the ceiling. 11 seconds. Vale changed approach. Minister, between ourselves, some of your people appear to misunderstand the gravity of this moment. At the window, Elias shifted his wrist once. A minute motion. Noted. My people understand timing very well, Mara said. Then advise them accordingly. I do. Do you? Mara looked directly at him now. Every day. The projection held for another breath. Then Vale inclined his head by the minimum acceptable degree. We will await your formal response. You'll receive what is appropriate. The line went dark. The office returned to its own sound. Vent. Relay click. Distant foot traffic outside the outer chamber. Mara did not move for several seconds. Then she reached for the top page, turned it over, and wrote 4 words on the blank back. They have fixed a date. Elias came back to the desk. He asked whether that was final. Yes. He expected you to say no. I did say no. Not in the way he wanted. She set down the pen. They're not trying to force a concession. No. They're trying to force timing. Yes. She slid the page toward him. He read the 4 words and set the sheet back down exactly where it had been. In the outer chamber, one aide entered with a narrow tray carrying fresh printouts and a glass of water. Mara nodded thanks. The aide placed the tray carefully on the side table, noticed the active slate, noticed Elias, and left without a question. The glass caught the window light and threw a brief reflection across the papers. Elias picked up one of the new printouts. Transit Board sent the revised commercial lane map. And insurance groups have started rerouting on their own. Quietly. Based on rumor? Based on cost exposure. That's faster than rumor. He handed her the sheet. Several civilian routes had shifted a few degrees outward from council inspection corridors. Harmless on paper. Expensive in practice. No official order had been given. The market had smelled structure before the governments announced it. Mara took a sip of water and set the glass down on the same ring already marked into the desk coaster. So it begins there. It began before that. Yes, she said. But now it has receipts. Elias turned off the visible traffic grid. The slate went black again. What do you need from me? Mara looked once more at the ultimatum, the duplicate attachment, the rerouted lanes, the note in her own hand. Then she reached to the side and pressed the lifted calibration strip flat with her thumb. This time she held it there a little longer. When they set deadlines, she said, they assume the decision belongs to the side keeping time. The strip warmed against her finger. Elias waited. Mara released it. The edge stayed down. For the next 6 hours, she said, I want a full map of every consequence they expect us to fear. Trade, mobility, observers, credit exposure, lane access, committee votes, all of it. He nodded once. Then, she said, I want the list of which of those still matters if we stop asking permission. Nothing changed in his face. He picked up the dark slate, turned it on, and began building the request tree without another word. Mara gathered the papers into one aligned stack. The desk was still crowded, but now it looked deliberate. Beyond the glass, Earth kept turning, cloud over ocean, night moving under day. On the wall, the calibration strip remained flat. The delay line on the central monitor held for half a second longer than it should have, then corrected itself without comment. Elias noticed because he had been watching the system clocks, not the data. The timestamp in the corner ticked forward, hesitated, then aligned again with the internal reference. No alert. No flag. The correction was too clean to be an error and too small to be logged as anything worth fixing. He tapped the corner once, not to interact with it, but to confirm it behaved like a surface. It did. Across the desk, Mara had removed the top 3 sheets from the stack and spread them in a narrow arc. Not a fan, not quite a line. She adjusted the middle page twice, as if the angle mattered more than the content. "Show me the insurance drift again," she said. Elias slid the slate closer and projected the civilian lane map between them. Thin lines traced the routes freighters used to avoid delay, inspection, or cost. The changes were subtle. A degree outward here. A small bend there. No route was closed. No route was declared unsafe. The pattern was not avoidance. It was preference. Mara leaned forward slightly, her eyes moving along the edges of the lines rather than across them. "They're not moving away from the council," she said. "No. They're moving toward predictability." "Yes. And the council's inspection corridors are no longer predictable." "They are predictable," Elias said. "Just not in a way that lowers risk." She nodded once. "That's enough." He minimized the map and opened a list that had been growing for the past hour. It had no title yet. Only categories: trade exposure, transit access, observer rights, credit channels, arbitration pathways. Each category had subpoints. Each subpoint had notes attached with time markers. Some were estimates. Some were already confirmed. Mara did not read the list yet. Instead, she picked up the pen again and drew a short line under her earlier note. "They have fixed a date. They expect us to wait for it." She set the pen down with care, parallel to the edge of the paper this time. Elias watched the second line, then looked back at the list. "They assume you'll respond before the window closes." "Yes. And if you don't, they move to enforcement, which they've already outlined, which they've already begun preparing," she said. He adjusted one of the categories, moving observer rights above transit access. The list shifted slightly, reorganizing itself without any change in content. Mara noticed. Why that order? Observers create records. Records create justification. Transit changes can be framed as response to those records. Which means the first move isn't economic. No. She sat back, just enough for the chair to settle under her. The slight leftward drift caught and corrected itself against her posture. "In that case," she said, "we don't start with trade." Elias made no note. He did not need to. The list would adjust when he began to build the response. From the outer chamber came the sound of paper being slid across a surface. Not shuffled, placed. The aides were still working through incoming transcripts. The rhythm had changed, though. Fewer pauses between placements. More material arriving. Mara turned one of the pages over and tapped the blank side once with her finger. "What have they not said yet?" Elias did not answer immediately. He moved one subpoint under credit channels, then another under arbitration pathways. The list grew cleaner as it became more complex. "They haven't specified thresholds," he said at last. "For enforcement." "Yes. They left it open. They left it adjustable." She looked at the delay line again, as if it might hesitate once more. It did not. "That's useful," she said. "For them." "For us," she corrected. He let that sit. Mara reached for the glass of water, took a small sip, and set it back exactly within the faint ring already marked on the coaster. The reflection shifted across the paper stack and then disappeared. "Call up the council's enforcement draft," she said. Elias opened the duplicate attachment. 2 identical documents appeared side by side. The formatting was perfect. The language restrained. Mara pointed at the left version. "Scroll to the section on monitoring authority." He did. The text described a transition. Neutral committees would be replaced by council security adjuncts in cases where compliance uncertainty exceeded acceptable margins. The phrase had been used 3 times. Each instance carried slightly different context. "Define acceptable margins," Mara said. Elias highlighted the phrase. No definition followed. Only references to internal council standards not included in the packet. They didn't include it. No. They won't. No. She nodded again. Good. Elias looked at her. Because it means they can't declare violation without exposing the standard. They can reference it. They can, she said. But if we act before they apply it, the reference has nothing to attach to. He considered that. You want to move before the threshold exists in practice. I want to move before it becomes visible. He turned off one of the duplicate documents. The second remained. Then timing matters more than content. It always did. He did not disagree. The vent hummed. 11 seconds. Click. In the outer chamber, one of the aides paused long enough to speak in a low voice. The other answered with a single word. Then the work resumed. Elias shifted his weight slightly, enough to change his angle to the desk. Fleet will need a directive if this moves out of the diplomatic channel. It won't move out, Mara said. It already has. Not formally. That won't slow anything. It will shape how it's recorded. He accepted that. Recording mattered. Not because it changed what happened, but because it determined what could be justified later. Then we write the first record, he said. Mara's eyes moved to the blank side of the second page. No, she said. We create the condition that forces them to write it. He paused. That's less controlled. It's more precise. How? Because they'll choose the language that binds them. Elias turned that over once in his mind. Then he nodded. All right. He began to restructure the list again. Categories shifted. Some collapsed into others. A new heading appeared at the top. External trigger conditions. Mara watched the words form. Good. He added subpoints beneath it. Each one tied to an element in the council's packet. Each one mapped to a likely reaction if a certain line was crossed. Which one? He asked. Not yet. She reached for the calibration strip again, pressed it flat, and this time smoothed it along its length. The adhesive held for a moment longer than before. Elias noticed the motion but said nothing. Mara released the strip and turned back to the desk. We need something small. He looked at the list. Define small. Something that doesn't look like refusal, but isn't compliance. Yes. He scanned the categories. Trade changes would be visible too quickly. Transit adjustments would trigger insurance responses. Credit channels were already shifting on their own. Observer rights, he said. Mara did not answer immediately. She let the idea sit in the space between them. Go on. If we alter observer access protocols, Elias said, we can force the council to respond without invoking enforcement directly. How? By redefining the scope of what they can see. She leaned forward again. Not blocking them. No. Not limiting them. No. Changing what counts as observation. Yes. Mara's hand hovered over the paper stack, then settled on the top page. They rely on observers to establish narrative. And thresholds. And thresholds, she echoed. Elias added a new subpoint under external trigger conditions. Observer scope redefinition. He paused. This will be read as technical. It should be. It will still be seen. Everything is seen, Mara said. The question is when. He finished the subpoint and added a note beneath it. Delay between implementation and recognition. Mara watched the words appear. How long? Minutes if they're looking. They're always looking. Then seconds. She nodded. Enough. Elias saved the list without naming it. In the outer chamber, the sound of paper placement stopped. A moment later, one of the aides appeared in the doorway. Minister, she said. Incoming relay from the Vesta lanes. Civilian authority, not council. Mara looked up. Put it through. The aide stepped back, and the projection field activated again. This time the image was less formal. A civilian coordinator, mid-level, seated in a narrow control room with too many screens and not enough space. Minister Ilian, he said, with a slight delay in his voice. Go ahead. We've had 3 independent requests from insurers to reroute through secondary corridors outside standard inspection paths. They're asking for confirmation that Earth will recognize those routes as compliant. Mara glanced at Elias. He had already opened a blank field on the slate. "What's your current policy?" she asked. "We follow council inspection designations. And if those designations change?" "They haven't yet." "They might," she said. The coordinator hesitated. "We need to know whether to move now or wait." Mara looked at the paper in front of her. The 2 lines she had written remained simple, almost insufficient. "They expect us to wait." She turned the page over again. "Hold your routes," she said into the projection. "Do not reroute yet." The coordinator blinked once. "Understood. And log every request you receive," she added. "Time source, wording." "Yes, Minister." The line cut. Elias closed the blank field. "You told them to wait." "Yes." "Why?" "Because we're not the only ones being timed." He considered that. "They're watching civilian movement to justify their next step," he said. "Yes. And if nothing moves? They have to decide whether to act without that cover." He nodded slowly. "That narrows their options. It makes them choose earlier," she said. "And without their own narrative." Mara placed the pen back on the paper, this time slightly off parallel. A small deviation. "Now," she said. "We adjust observer scope." Elias began to type. On the wall, the calibration strip held flat. "For now." The chair across from Mara's desk shifted a fraction to the right after Elias nudged it into place, then settled back a few millimeters off-center. He noticed the return, not the movement. He didn't correct it again. Mara had already started writing. Not notes this time. A sequence. Short lines, spaced unevenly, each one connected to the next by implication rather than structure. From where he stood, Elias could see only fragments. Observer scope definition layer. Definition layer access timing. Access timing record formation. She paused, then drew a small bracket around the last 2 lines. Not enclosing them fully, just enough to group without closing. "Send me the last 3 observer audits," she said. Elias didn't ask which jurisdictions. He pulled them from the slate and projected them above the desk, slightly offset so they didn't overlap her pages. 3 reports appeared. Each one formatted differently, though they followed the same standard. Each one carried a timestamp, a location, and a certification line confirming neutrality. Mara stood, not abruptly, but with the kind of motion that suggests she had already decided to do so seconds earlier. She stepped closer to the projections. Her eyes didn't scan top to bottom. They moved along the margins first. Signatures, verification chains, embedded references. "Scroll the second one," she said. Elias did. The text shifted upward. A section on procedural compliance passed into view. Then a paragraph on observational limitations. Then a list of exceptions. "Stop." He did. Mara leaned in slightly, not close enough to touch the projection, but close enough that the light changed on her face. "Read that line," she said. Elias glanced at it. "Observations conducted within authorized temporal windows may be considered complete for certification purposes." She nodded once. "Temporal windows." He said nothing. "Define it," she said. "They don't." "Exactly." She stepped back and returned to the desk, but did not sit. Instead, she placed both hands on the edge of the paper stack and adjusted it again, aligning it to the corner of the desk pad. "Open the other 2, she said. He brought them side by side. "Search for the same phrase." He did. One returned a match. The other did not. "Second one uses it," Elias said. "Third one avoids it." "How does the third describe completion?" He scrolled. "Here," he said. "Observation duration sufficient to meet procedural thresholds." No mention of time. "No." Mara picked up the pen again and added a new line beneath her earlier sequence. "Temporal window is not equal to duration." She underlined it once, lightly. Elias watched the words settle into place. "They've built flexibility into their own definitions," he said. They've built inconsistency, she replied. He considered that. Which means we don't need to block observers, Mara said. We only need to define what they're allowed to consider complete. Elias looked back at the reports. We can't rewrite their standards. No, she said, but we can define our own. He turned slightly, shifting his weight again. The chair behind him stayed where it was this time. That would be seen as non-compliance. Only if they can prove it conflicts with their standards. They'll say it does. They'll say many things. He didn't respond to that. Mara set the pen down and finally sat again, careful to avoid the leftward drift. Draft a directive, she said. Internal classification. Not public yet. He opened a new document field. Title? He asked. She didn't answer immediately. Her eyes moved once more to the calibration strip. Still flat. Observation Integrity Protocol, she said. He typed it. Section 1, she continued. All external observer access will be granted as requested, without delay. Elias paused for half a second. Without delay? Yes. He typed it anyway. Section 2, she said. Observation completeness will be determined solely by Earth-based temporal standards. He continued. Define that, he said. Not yet. He left a placeholder. Section 3, Mara said. All observer records must include full timestamp verification against Earth reference clocks. That's standard. Make it explicit. He did. Section 4, she said. Any observation conducted outside Earth temporal alignment will be considered partial and subject to review. Elias stopped typing. That's the pivot, he said. Yes. They won't accept that. They don't have to. He looked at her. They'll have to respond to it, she said. And when they do, they'll have to define their own temporal windows. And expose the standard. Yes. He finished typing the section. The document remained open, unnamed beyond its title. In the outer chamber, the aides had stopped sorting. One of them was now standing still, listening to something through a headset. The other had turned toward the main console, fingers resting lightly on the surface without moving. Mara noticed but did not turn. Elias saved the draft locally. Do we release it? He asked. Not yet. When? When they ask for observer access. They already have it. They have access, she said. They haven't exercised it under pressure. He nodded slowly. The vent hummed. 11 seconds. Click. Mara reached for the glass again, took another sip, and set it down slightly off the ring this time. The base left a new, faint mark beside the old one. Elias noticed that too. What are they waiting for? He asked. For movement, she said. From us. Yes. And if we don't move, they'll create movement. He glanced at the slate. Transit lanes, insurance drift, observer audits. Those are all signals, she said. Not actions. They can turn into actions. They will, she agreed. But not all at once. He looked back at the document. This forces them to choose which one to act on first. Yes. And they'll choose the one that gives them the most control. Or the one that looks like it does. He let that settle. In the outer chamber, the aide with the headset spoke quietly. Yes. Understood. Then silence again. Mara turned her head slightly. What is it? The aide stepped into the doorway. Minister, Council observers have requested expanded access to the Vesta transit logs. Immediate response requested. Elias glanced at Mara. She didn't hesitate. Grant it, she said. The aide blinked once. All of it. All of it. The aide nodded and stepped back. Elias looked at the document again. You're letting them in before we define the standard. Yes. They'll record everything. They'll try. He understood then. They won't know what counts as complete, he said. No. And they'll have to decide in real time. Yes. He turned back to the slate and opened the system clock interface. Multiple time references appeared, layered over each other. Earth Standard. Station Internal. Council Relay. They're already out of sync, he said. By how much? Milliseconds. Enough. For now. Mara leaned forward again, her attention fully on the slate. Increase the variance. Elias didn't move. Within acceptable limits, she added. He nodded and began adjusting the internal reference. Not enough to trigger alerts. Not enough to break synchronization. Just enough to create ambiguity. The timestamps shifted slightly, then settled. Mara watched the numbers. They won't notice immediately, Elias said. They don't need to, she replied. In the outer chamber, the aide returned again. Observers are connecting now. Route them through standard channels, Mara said. Yes, Minister. The door remained open this time. A faint change in the room's sound followed. Not louder, just different. More systems active. More data moving. Elias closed the clock interface and returned to the document. Do we finalize? He asked. Mara looked at the title. Observation Integrity Protocol. She reached for the pen again and wrote one more line beneath her earlier notes. Define before they declare. She capped the pen and set it down. Not yet, she said. We wait. For what? For the first record they think is complete. Elias saved the document again, still internal. On the wall, the calibration strip remained flat. The chair across the desk stayed slightly off-center. The delay line on the monitor held steady. For now, the shadow edge from the window frame moved across the desk and stopped just short of the second water ring. It held there longer than the previous shift, as if the station's rotation had hesitated. Then it continued, sliding over the faint mark without touching the first. Mara noticed the pause because her hand was resting beside the glass. The difference between the two rings, one older, one newly made, caught the light at different angles. For a moment they didn't align. She did not move the glass. Across from her, Elias had turned the slate slightly so its edge no longer matched the desk line. It wasn't careless. It gave him a different reference point. The document remained open, unchanged. The cursor blinked once every second. In the outer chamber, the sound had shifted again. No longer paper. No longer sorting. A steady, low stream of system acknowledgments. Observers were not just connected. They were active. First record will come from Vesta, Elias said. Yes. They'll start with transit logs. Because they think it's neutral. It isn't, he said. Nothing is, she replied. He didn't disagree. The monitor on the sidewall updated without sound. A new feed appeared, observer access logs. Entries began to populate in narrow lines. Each one carried a time, a source, a request type, a completion flag. The first few lines filled in quickly. Access granted. Data stream initiated. Verification pending. Mara stood again, not to approach the screen, but to change her angle to it. Standing made the lines easier to read without focusing too hard. Watch the completion flags, she said. Elias moved closer to the display, his attention on the timing rather than the content. The flags began to appear beside each entry. Complete, complete, partial. He narrowed his focus. They're marking completion before verification finishes, he said. Yes. Based on their own window. Yes. And the delay we introduced means their timestamps won't match ours, she finished. The next line appeared. Complete. Elias tapped the screen lightly, isolating the entry. The timestamp sat within acceptable variance. Nothing obvious. Nothing that would trigger an alert. They won't see it yet, he said. They don't need to, Mara said. She returned to the desk and sat, this time allowing the chair to drift slightly left before correcting it. A deliberate imbalance, then adjustment. Bring up the first completed record, she said. Elias pulled it from the log and projected it above the desk. The document was clean, structured. It described a segment of Vesta transit traffic, verified against observer protocols, marked as complete under council standards. Mara read it once, quickly. Scroll to the timestamp section. He did. 2 lines appeared. Observer timestamp, aligned to council relay. Source timestamp, aligned to local system. The difference between them was small, measurable but within tolerance. For them, Elias said. For now, Mara replied. She leaned back, her eyes still on the projection. They'll certify this, she said. Yes. And use it as baseline. Yes. She reached for the pen again but didn't write. Instead, she tapped it once against the paper, then set it down. Now, she said. We define. Elias didn't move immediately. Do it, she added. He turned back to the slate and reopened the draft. Observation Integrity Protocol. The cursor waited at the placeholder under Section 2. Define Earth Temporal Standard, he said. Mara looked at the projection again, then at the calibration strip. Still flat, still holding. Anchor it to planetary rotation, she said. Elias typed. Absolute, he asked. Relative. He adjusted the phrasing. Section 2. He read aloud quietly as he worked. Observation completeness will be determined solely by Earth-based temporal standards, defined as synchronized reference to planetary rotational cycles and locally verified system clocks. Mara nodded once. Add variance limits, she said. How tight? Enough to exclude their relay drift. He calculated quickly, then entered the value. Done. Section 4, she said. He moved down. Any observation conducted outside Earth temporal alignment will be considered partial and subject to review. Add a clause, she said. Partial records cannot be certified as complete. He added it. The document shifted slightly as the new lines settled into place. Elias paused. This will invalidate their first record, he said. Yes. They've already marked it complete. They've marked it complete under their system. And under ours? Partial. He looked at her. They'll have to respond, he said. Yes. And they won't be able to ignore it. No. He saved the document again, this time with a temporary classification tag. Mara stood. Release it, she said. He didn't ask where. He routed it through internal channels first, then flagged it for external transmission under standard procedural update protocols. Not an announcement. Not a declaration. A revision. The system accepted it without resistance. In the outer chamber, the aide at the console looked up. Protocol update received, she said. Routing to observers. Mara nodded. Do not highlight it, she added. The aide hesitated for a fraction of a second, then nodded. Understood. No emphasis. No alert. Just another document in the stream. Elias turned back to the observer logs. The next entries began to appear. Access granted. Data stream initiated. Verification pending. A pause. Then, partial. He watched the line settle. They've picked it up, he said. Yes. They're adjusting. Of course they are. The next line appeared. Partial. Another. Partial. Elias exhaled once, not loudly. They're reclassifying in real time, he said. They have to. They can't certify anything. Not yet. He looked at the earlier record, still marked complete. They'll revisit it. They'll try. And when they do, they'll find it doesn't meet the new standard, she said. He nodded slowly. That forces them to define their own temporal window. Yes. And once they do, they lose flexibility. The room held that for a moment. In the outer chamber, the system acknowledgements slowed. Not fewer entries, just longer between them. Observers were no longer processing automatically. They were checking. Elias noticed the change. They're hesitating, he said. They're thinking, Mara replied. That's slower. Yes. He glanced at the slate. Fleet is asking for status. Tell them nothing has changed. That won't satisfy them. It's not meant to. He sent the response without comment. Mara returned to the desk and aligned the paper stack again. The edges met cleanly this time. She picked up the top sheet and read her own lines. They have fixed a date. They expect us to wait for it. Define before they declare. She added one more. They cannot finish what they cannot define. Elias watched her write. That's the idea, he said. She set the pen down. It's the only one that matters. The monitor updated again. A new entry appeared, different from the others. Observer request. Clarification of temporal standard. Elias looked at Mara. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached for the glass and moved it back onto the original ring, covering the newer mark. Wait, she said. For what? For them to ask again. The request remained on the screen. No response sent. No clarification given. The vent hummed. 11 seconds. Click. The shadow edge from the window had moved past both rings now, leaving the desk evenly lit. The calibration strip remained flat. For now, the air vent gave a longer exhale than usual, then returned to its steady rhythm without any visible change in output. Elias noticed because he had been counting the interval again. The pause was not long enough to suggest a fault, but it was long enough to interrupt expectation. He did not look at the vent. He looked at the observer log instead. The request for clarification remained on the screen, unchanged. No follow-up yet. No escalation. Just a single line waiting in the system. Mara had not moved. Her hands rested on the desk, one near the paper stack, the other closer to the glass. The pen lay between them, slightly angled, not aligned with anything. They're deciding whether to formalize the question, Elias said. Yes. If they do, it becomes part of the record. And binds them to an interpretation, she said. He nodded. And if they don't? He asked. They'll try to proceed without it. That's worse for them. It's less visible, she said, which makes it tempting. The log updated. A second line appeared beneath the first. Observer request. Clarification of temporal standard. Identical wording. New timestamp. Elias glanced at Mara. She didn't look at him. Now, she said. He opened a response field. Minimal, she added. He waited. Mara picked up the pen, then set it down again without writing. Observation completeness, she said slowly, is defined by alignment with Earth-based temporal reference as specified in Section 2 of the protocol. Elias typed it exactly. Nothing else? He asked. Nothing else. He sent it. The response entered the system without emphasis. No priority flag. No direct routing. It would be seen because it existed, not because it was announced. The log held for a moment. Then, observer acknowledgement received. Elias leaned slightly closer to the screen. They've accepted the definition, he said. They've accepted the wording, Mara corrected. That's enough. For now. The next entries began to populate again. Access granted. Data stream initiated. Verification pending. A pause. Then, partial. Another. Partial. The pattern continued. Elias watched the sequence build. They're not certifying anything, he said. They can't. They could challenge the standard. They will, she said. But not here. He understood. Not in the log. No. They'll take it back to the council. Yes. And then, they'll decide whether to redefine their own system or contest ours. He considered both options. Redefinition limits them, he said. Contestation exposes them, she replied. He nodded. The vent returned to its regular interval. 11 seconds. Click. In the outer chamber, the aides had resumed quiet movement. Not sorting. Not placing. Adjusting. Screens shifted. Inputs changed. The rhythm was different again, less reactive, more deliberate. Mara reached for the paper stack and lifted it slightly, then set it back down in the same position. Show me the first record again, she said. Elias pulled it up. The original entry still displayed complete under the council's classification. Beneath it, a new line had been added. Earth classification. Partial. The two labels sat side by side, neither overriding the other. They haven't removed their certification, Elias said. They can't, Mara replied. It's already recorded. They've added ours. They had to. He looked at the timestamps again. They're out of alignment now, he said. Yes. Not by much. Enough. He let that sit. They've lost a shared reference point, he said. Yes. And without that, they can't close anything cleanly, she finished. The implication settled into the room without needing further explanation. Elias turned off the projection. The desk returned to its own light. "What about the deadline?" he asked. Mara looked at the top sheet again. "They have fixed a date." She slid it slightly to the left, revealing the line beneath. "They expect us to wait for it." "They still have it," she said. "They can still act on it." "Yes. But now, they don't have a clean basis," she said. He nodded. "They could ignore the observer layer." "They could," she agreed. "They could move directly to enforcement." "They could." He waited. "They won't," she said. "Why?" "Because they've already committed to the record." He considered that. "They'd have to contradict their own process." "Yes. And that costs them more than delay." "Yes." He looked back at the slate. "They'll try to repair alignment first." "Of course. And that takes time." "Yes." He exhaled once. "Time they fixed themselves." She didn't respond to that. The monitor updated again. A new entry appeared, different from the previous ones. "Council relay, internal synchronization request." Elias focused on it. "They're adjusting their clocks," he said. "Yes. To match ours." "To match something," she said. He watched the line. "They won't match exactly," he said. "They don't need to," she replied. "They just need enough consistency to certify again." "Yes." He paused. "But if they do, they'll have defined their temporal window," she said. "And lost flexibility." "Yes." He nodded slowly. The room held that. In the outer chamber, one of the aides stepped in briefly. "Minister," she said. "Council liaison is requesting a direct line. Not formal." Mara didn't look up immediately. "Hold it," she said. The aide hesitated. "For how long?" "Until they send it again." The aide nodded and left. Elias glanced at Mara. "They're moving faster now," he said. "They have to," she replied. "They're trying to regain control. They're trying to regain coherence." He accepted that. The slate updated again. The synchronization request remained active. "No confirmation yet." "They're not aligned," he said. "Not yet. They will be. Eventually." He looked at her. "That's the window." "Yes." "How long?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached for the calibration strip again and pressed it lightly. It didn't move. She withdrew her hand. "Long enough," she said. Elias didn't ask for precision. He returned to the slate and began tracking the relay adjustments. Small shifts, incremental changes, nothing abrupt. "They're being careful," he said. "They always are. They're avoiding visible drift." "Yes. But it's still there. It always is." He watched the numbers settle, then shift again. "They're chasing alignment," he said. "They're chasing definition," she replied. The difference mattered. The monitor showed another update. Observer record. Pending. No classification yet. Elias leaned slightly forward. "They're waiting," he said. "For what?" "For alignment." Mara nodded. "And when they get it, they'll try to certify again." "Yes." He looked at her. "And we don't stop them," she said. He understood. "We let them define it." "Yes." "And then?" She didn't answer. Instead, she picked up the pen and added one final line to the page. "Once defined, it cannot be moved." She set the pen down. The room remained quiet. The vent hummed. The clocks shifted. The observers waited. And the council, somewhere beyond the station, adjusted its own sense of time. The console light above the side monitor dimmed for a fraction of a second, then returned to its previous brightness without adjusting the rest of the panel. Elias noticed it because the surrounding indicators did not follow. Only that single segment softened, as if it had responded to a different input than the system it belonged to. He did not touch it. He watched the observer log instead. The pending entry remained unresolved. No classification, no timestamp confirmation, just a line suspended between states. Mara had not moved from the desk. The paper stack remained aligned. The pen rested where she had placed it. The glass sat within the original ring, the newer mark now hidden beneath it. The calibration strip still held flat. "They're close," Elias said. "Yes. They've reduced the variance." "Yes. Not enough." "Not yet." He tracked the relay adjustments on the slate. The differences were narrowing. Not quickly, not smoothly. Each correction introduced a new offset somewhere else. "They're balancing against themselves," he said. "They always were," Mara replied. The monitor updated. The pending entry flickered once. Not visibly, but in the timing of its refresh, then settled again. "No change. They won't certify until they're certain," Elias said. "They can't be certain," she replied. He didn't argue. "They'll decide what certain means," he said. "Yes. And that's the point." "Yes." The room held steady. In the outer chamber, the aides had stopped moving entirely. Not because there was nothing to do, because nothing required immediate action. The system had entered a state where inputs no longer demanded responses. Mara reached for the top sheet again. She didn't read it this time. She simply looked at the lines she had written, as if confirming their presence. "They have fixed a date. They expect us to wait for it. Define before they declare. They cannot finish what they cannot define. Once defined, it cannot be moved." She slid the page slightly forward, exposing the edge of the desk beneath it. Elias noticed the movement. "Liaison sent the request again," he said quietly. Mara didn't look up. "Hold it," she said. "For how long?" She considered for a moment. "Until this resolves." He nodded. The monitor updated again. The pending entry changed. "Observer record. Complete." Elias focused on the timestamp. It aligned. Not perfectly, but within the variance they had defined. "They've done it," he said. "Yes." "They've chosen their window." "Yes." He opened the entry. The record displayed cleanly. Structured. Certified under council standards. Cross-referenced against their adjusted temporal alignment. Beneath it, a second line appeared. Earth classification. Complete. Elias watched it settle. "They matched," he said. "They defined," Mara corrected. He nodded. "They can certify again." "Yes." "They've restored their process." "Yes." He paused. "But now." "They're bound to it," she said. He understood. "They can't shift it without breaking their own record." "Yes. And every future observation must follow the same standard," she finished. He looked back at the slate. "They've stabilized," he said. "For now." The vent hummed. 11 seconds. Click. The room felt different. Not louder. Not quieter. Just settled. In the outer chamber, one of the aides exhaled softly, then resumed normal movement. Not urgency. Not tension. Just work. Elias turned to Mara. "They'll move to the next phase," he said. "Yes." "Using this as baseline." "Yes." "They'll think they've regained control." "They have," she said. He looked at her. "That's not a problem?" he asked. "No." "Why?" "Because now their control has shape." He considered that. "And before?" "It didn't." He nodded slowly. The implication settled in. "They can't expand it without redefining it again," he said. "Yes. And redefining it costs them the same way it did the first time." He let that sit. The monitor updated again. A new entry appeared. Council Directive. Observer Protocol Acknowledgement. Elias opened it. The text was brief. Formal. It recognized Earth's temporal standard as an acceptable reference for observation completeness within the current operational context. No more. No less. "They've accepted it," he said. "They've accepted the necessity," Mara replied. He glanced at her. "They didn't have a choice." "They always had a choice," she said. "This one just cost less." He nodded. The slate updated again. Fleet status unchanged. Transit lanes holding. Insurance drift stabilizing. No new enforcement signals. "They haven't acted on the deadline," Elias said. "No. They still can." "Yes." He waited. "They won't," she said. "Why?" "Because the conditions have changed." He looked at the paper again. They have fixed a date. That date assumed a different system, she said. And now they'd have to justify acting within a framework they just accepted. He understood. They'd contradict their own acknowledgement. Yes. And that's more expensive than delay. Yes. He exhaled once. The room remained quiet. Mara reached for the pen again. She didn't write. She simply adjusted its position, aligning it with the edge of the paper. Elias noticed the alignment. Liaison is still waiting, he said. Mara looked at the dark projection field where the call would appear. Put it through, she said. Elias routed the connection. Seared Veil appeared again, composed as before, though his posture carried a slight forward lean this time. Minister Ilian, he said. Liaison. A brief pause. We have reviewed your protocol update, he said. I assumed you would. The Council acknowledges the validity of your temporal standard within the current context. Mara inclined her head slightly. We appreciate the clarification, he added. Of course. Vale's eyes shifted once, taking in the room again. The desk, the papers, the unchanged arrangement. The Council will proceed with observer operations under the revised framework, he said. That seems reasonable. Another pause. The compliance window remains in effect, he said. Yes. Mara said nothing more. Vale waited. Elias watched the exchange without moving. The silence extended just long enough to become a decision point. Vale spoke again. Minister, will Earth be issuing a formal response before the deadline? Mara looked at the paper in front of her, then at the calibration strip, then back at Vale. No, she said. The word settled cleanly. No emphasis. No resistance. Just a statement. Vale held her gaze for a moment, then inclined his head again. Understood, he said. The line closed. The projection faded. The room returned to its own light. Elias looked at Mara. They'll record that as non-response, he said. Yes. And she picked up the top sheet, turned it over, placed it at the bottom of the stack. They already have their answer, she said. He didn't ask her to explain. He didn't need to. The observer logs continued to update. Complete. 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 The system held. The calibration strip remained flat. The glass stayed within its ring. The chair remained slightly off-center. And outside, Earth continued its rotation, unchanged, beneath a sky that no longer needed permission to define its own time.